Welcome to the Small Business Sisterhood podcast. I'm your host, Pepper Makepeace, an online business strategist for female solopreneurs and side hustlers, and the founder of the Small Business Sisterhood, an online membership community serving small business owners in the first stages of business. Join me as I go behind the scenes with female entrepreneurs, revealing the struggles, strategies, and inspiring stories of these amazing women. If you're interested in connecting with like-minded women in a supportive online community that helps you stay focused, motivated, and accountable as you build your business, check us out at smallbusinesssisterhood.com. Today we're talking to Micheline Edwards, a holistic life and wellness coach, empowering women to design space to be heard, seen, and create intentional positive change in their lives. She also offers hands-on immersion experiences and retreats on her family enrichment farm. Thank you, Micheline, for being on the podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
I am so excited to be here. Just really an amazing year in many ways from the entrepreneurial standpoint in using our resources wisely. So I'm excited to be part of this.
Yeah. So tell everybody a little bit about you and your business. Actually, you have multiple businesses. So tell everybody about what you do.
I do. I started out actually in women well care, midwifery, and a doula. I was a doula and a lactation consultant. I served as a midwife for many years. And I ran that business, and it kind of, as my children got older, evolved into more just health and wellness and mindfulness and life coaching. So I've operated that business for almost 30 years now. And then for the past 15 to 20 years, off and on, we kind of started slow. I've operated our family farm as a sister business to that. And what we do is for local clients, we offer a lot of hands-on wellness and mindful activities, everything from cooking lessons and yoga to just opportunities to relax and unwind on our trails and things. So they do kind of operate simultaneously. So, and I've done all that while homeschooling 5 children who are now grown. So it's been a ride.
You have a lot of awesome experience. I can't wait to dig in. I think that juggling any of those things on their own is amazing, let alone all of those. So like, how do you do that? I guess that's gonna be my first question. How do you manage all of those things? How have you made that work?
I think starting out, it was just a do or die response.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wanted to get from point A to point B, and it was just like, okay, I just did it. However, I could do it by the seat of my pants. Looking back, that kind of handicapped me because I didn't use my resources wisely, and I just talked to you about that. And I think recognizing what your most valuable resources are, and for me, it was health. So maintaining health and taking care of yourself, which is really important. And I think a lot of women, especially if they have busy families or busy schedules, don't tend to do that. They're always the last ones to take care of themselves. And that's a big thing, including saying no. Your time management, time is huge. You can't get that back. You just can't go there. And the third resource is not really a resource, but just respect is being able to, I hate to say manage, but be able to navigate respect from those who you are most closely in contact with. So that they actually respect what you're doing and your space and your time and the fact that you're legitimately running a business. That's really important. And that was probably my hardest obstacle for sure.
That's a hard one for a lot of people. I've struggled with that myself, kind of comes and goes over the years, but tell me more about how you've done that. Like, how do you get started with that?
It was really a struggle because when we started, for me, I was already sort of up and running on a business. I was doing labor support and lactation consulting. I was finishing up my midwifery training. We just had our third baby, and I was kind of just getting my business going. And I was working from home with that was not hard because at that time, years ago, it was just a lot of phone work and some people working meeting with clients, and it was still pretty manageable. The big setback for me came, I ended up pregnant again and on bed rest. And so kind of like everybody this year with 2020, I ended up, tied to my home and still trying to manage a home and family and business. And in the course of that, we ended up homeschooling unexpectedly, like a lot of people have this year, because my children were in a private school and there was no longer transportation because I couldn't get up and take them. So my whole world was just really, I'm sure a lot of people can relate, just picked up and just dumped upside down. We
Yeah.
had a new baby coming. I had a toddler. I had a business that I was trying to start. I had to really delegate clients out to colleagues. That ended up being a really good thing. There's always that shining lining and everything. I always tell all my clients that sometimes your very weakest moments are your strongest points coming forward, because you really have to knuckle down and realize what's important to move forward. So
Definitely.
I've talked to a lot of people about that this year, but I just did it. And I don't really know how I did it, but really my biggest problem in managing that, though, and this was years and years ago, where first of all, working from home in general wasn't as common. We didn't have podcasts. We didn't have, the internet was kind of sketch. Really, the phone was my big tool, and email was kind of, in the works there. But a lot of everything was done in person. So managing time was extremely important, because a few years into that, I had 5 children, busy with sports and school. We were homeschooling them and meeting with clients. I have a blog post actually about meeting with a client once, where she had come in and she was having all kinds of problems. And I had one child that was just, he was off the wall, crazy. He knows he was. And my kids kept coming down. They always knew if mom had a client or was on the phone, you needed to, go play quietly for a few minutes. And this lady had been there, and very long story short, he actually had done something horrible in the middle of this that her husband had witnessed. And, I was horribly embarrassed. And so those moments of embarrassment and fright that came, because I felt like I was never taken professionally. And I think that's changed a lot, even before 2020, even before COVID and all that. But I think for a lot of people, all the stuff that's happened this year, the beautiful silver lining in that is that so many people who've wanted to make that jump into that entrepreneurial spot, or to work from home, or spend more time with family, or kind of do their own thing, this is such a golden opportunity to do that, because everybody's, much more respectful of your time. Nobody cares if your toddler runs, through a podcast naked or in their diaper. I mean, we just all laugh about it. Where, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 20, I talked to you about this. It's like, that was a mortifying moment. They were like, oh my gosh, how can she even be professional or serious about her business if this occurred? And now I think, not that anybody wants that to happen, but I think women out there, and anybody in general, have just this tremendous opportunity now, because of the technology, and really honestly, because we've all kind of been forced to step back and stay home and really focus on what we want to do.
Right. And I think there's some understanding that has come with more people getting exposed to that way of working,
Mm-hmm.
and how there are certain things that you just can't control, and life happens around you regardless. And
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of understanding, I think, that's come from that, now that, there's so many people having to adjust and make things work at home. So that's
absolutely.
that silver lining we talk about.
Yeah, I used to teach prenatal classes with a baby in a sling, and I had people like, wow, that's just amazing. I can't believe you can do that. And I really just did it because it was out of necessity. I had a nursing baby. There were still other kids, and, sitters were not an option. But I think when you and I did our interview, I had one of my grandchildren asleep on my arm.
Right.
I feel like there's a much greater respect for family. But the flip side of that is that as an entrepreneur, you need to make sure that the family and your friends respect your time as well. So,
Yeah. How would you recommend navigating that portion of that?
Um, one of the big things I think is, first of all, really knowing who you are and what you want to do. You really
Mm.
have to be certain on that, because otherwise you can get detoured, I think, way too easy. And I did that a few times. I would step back, and sometimes you get just on the cusp of breaking ground or moving forward, and you just get frustrated because you're not really set in your direction. So, finding that out is super important. The second thing is knowing your rights. And that's something I talk to a lot of my clients about. And it kind of stemmed from dealing with labor and delivery clients, and started realizing that that washed so much into life, and that women, and well, most people, but especially if they're empaths, and women are mostly empaths, don't realize that honestly they do have a right to say no, or to be direct about what they're doing, or their time, or their space. And when people, act hurt or insulted, or bent out of shape because you say, hey, I've got a meeting, I need to go plug in my computer in 20 minutes. And they're like, oh my gosh, well, I guess I'll just leave. I thought I'd stop and visit. To not take that stuff personally, because that's just them. That's not you. But, even now that's hard to do. So your rights, and actually being really certain on those, and those kind of tie together. I work with a lot of my clients on a continuation program on going from discovering what you actually want and then putting a plan together and that plan isn't necessarily a business plan, but it really has to do with your personality and dealing with the people around you, and managing that. And the third is creating that space for it to happen. And those things, those three things kind of happen simultaneously. So you have to know who you are and what you want. You have to realize that you do have a right to pursue that. And then you have to create that space and how to do that and define that space. So
Absolutely. Tell me more about the knowing what you want piece. What do you mean by that?
Well, and that's something I worked with my labor and delivery clients a long time ago, because I would always ask them, well, what are you wanting out of your birth? And the patent answer always was a healthy baby. And then over the years, I've worked with other women, and I have a really good friend, Nadine Crespo, who actually had taken us through some exercises. And I kind of watched with intrigue on the exercises when she did it and the women's answers. And I realized that most people just define themselves by the external or by the very simple explanation. So if I were to ask you who you are right now, I don't know what your answer would be. I don't want to put you on the spot, but most people, I don't know if you want to try to answer it, but most people will I give a patent answer. It's, I'm so-and-so's wife, or I'm a nurse or a teacher. I'm a female, I'm a Christian, but they don't really discern and think about what internally is them, what makes them up, what makes them tick. And so it's kind of diving deeper into your soul. It could, it's not necessarily, well, I want to get from point A to B, or I want to finish my master's, or I want to open a business. It's really like, what's driving you to do that? What is the outcome that you're wanting, or what is the feeling that you're trying to achieve, or how does this define you? And so that takes a lot of work. And sometimes for some women, that's a really vulnerable space to be in. It's really uncomfortable. It can be even sad or etchy, because sometimes it brings up things from the past that they realize have been defining them that really shouldn't be. But usually it's very freeing when you get all the way through the process and really realize who it is that you are and what actually does define you.
I love that. And it's such an important thought process, I think. And when I first started my business back in 2008, I did corporate for a little while, and I was in a nonprofit situation for a while. And then, starting my own business, I kind of applied, you work 9 to 5 and then you're done. And, you have, XYZ in place, and this is how everything works together. And then I was like, well, it's not really what I want. I want, more time to do other things, and I don't want to just work constantly. And then I've had stages where it was like, all I did was work. It was like really like work heavy, like at night, like staying up too late, like getting out of balance with that, and having to come back again and say, okay, what is like the lifestyle, or like just day to day, like what do I want? And realizing that I don't want to work all the time, and I don't want to, come at this with the same mindset that I had working for somebody else. And it's really an important process, though, because you can go day after day after day in a routine and it not actually be what you want.
Absolutely. And that's an important part of defining who you are. It's not just the label that you apply to yourself, but why are you doing what you're doing?
Yeah.
Are you doing it for financial reasons? Are you doing it because this is a passion? Is it both? Are you needing or wanting more time with family, or just not wanting to, sit in a cubicle all day? Sometimes it's a combination of all those things, but you really do need to figure out and define why is it that you're pursuing, being a stay-at-home employed person, or a small office, or an entrepreneurial, or, if you want to even open a huge corporation, why is it that you're wanting to do that? What are you wanting out of that? And recognizing both what it's going to create for you, but also, what it's going to, both create positive and negatively, I guess is a good way of putting that, because you don't want to work so hard. I think most of us, if we step into the entrepreneurial realm, is because we have a dream or a calling. But I don't really know too many people that get up in the morning and say, hey, I want to work so hard at this business, creating this business, that I no longer have a life. And I don't think that's anybody's goal. And so I think, knowing that you want to say open a bakery is great, but why do you want to open this bakery? And what do you want to gain from it? And what do you not want to lose in the process is really important.
Yeah. And I think there's this kind of odd hustle culture that's been kind of creeping out the last several years of people like, if you're not working all the time and always, trying to promote your business, you're slacking or you're failing or something's wrong with how you're.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's such a strange mentality to me because I mean, that's great if that's what you want, and that's the life that you want is to kind of be in that mode, but I don't, and I know a lot of other entrepreneurs, they don't want that either, like, that's not. They have families,
Absolutely.
it's.
Yeah. I find a lot of female entrepreneurs are either single, very career driven women, and they have this time and this drive that they want to really create something big. But a lot of, and I'd say most of the women I work with actually have families. And part of the reason for entrepreneurship is actually spend more time with those families and with those
Right,
children. And
absolutely.
so totally, yeah, you're
Yeah.
not going to want to get up and just
No.
work. So
Right.
defining how that is for you is really, really important. And I know
Yeah.
for me, childcare was really one of my driving forces between joining a medical practice that I worked very closely with and did a lot of clinicals with versus doing private practice. And so for me, private practice was the difference between having to hire full-time childcare and pursue
Mm.
my dream or being able to manage my schedule myself with my husband and my clients and not have to put my kids in daycare all the time, which was a
Yeah.
personal choice for me. But it also was a financial choice. We had 5 children. Daycare was really expensive. So,
Yeah.
you put 5 kids in daycare, that's going to pretty much, so there was a financial issue as well. So I knew that in doing that, I wanted to be able to spend more time with the children, although we didn't initially set out to homeschool. That was one of those, we were going to do it for a few months till I was off bed rest and then quit. And we actually did quit twice and I went back to it because I realized for me, that was actually a time management thing too,
Mm.
because I just found it was a better use of our family time. For some people,
Mm.
it's not. It's not for
Mm.
everybody. I realize a lot of people are going to try that this year and say, never again, this is not for me.
Yeah.
And that's what I had planned to be that person. I didn't get up and say, hey, I think I'm going to homeschool my kids and run a business.
Mm.
But for me, it was financial and it was also pursuing a dream. And then I had to throw into that, what did I not want to lose? And that was time with the children or all my profits, really. So
Right. Yeah, it's such an important aspect of figuring out how to structure your business, structure your family time, and really think those things through. I think we can get sucked into things and then suddenly, a year's gone by and we haven't really structured it the way we want it to be. So.
I did finally give myself time, especially as, and I say a stay-at-home mom because even though I worked from home, if you asked most people that knew me, they would tell you I was just a stay-at-home mom, which
Mm.
was, I mean, ultimately being able to stay with my kids, that was a goal, but I think I had to really struggle with that label
Mm.
because I was running a business. And like you said, I was up sometimes till 2 or 3 in the morning, and then I would get up at 6 a.m. with my kids. There were nights I would be out all night with a lady in labor and not
Mm.
get home till 9 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't get to go home and go to bed. I still had to finish their lessons and cook dinner. And I didn't go to bed till 9 o'clock that night till everybody else was in bed. And so when people would say, oh, you're a stay-at-home mom, I think I really took, like, I was insulted by that. And I had to really, like, I've had to kind of come into my own season with that and realize that that was actually kind of a compliment, that I obviously must have been doing everything well enough that people didn't even realize that this was so seamlessly
Yeah, that's
executed.
amazing,
And
actually.
it really wasn't seamless, but but in that process of recognizing that, I finally gave myself permission to actually sit back and accept the peaceful, like you said, that peaceful side of entrepreneurship that I hadn't allowed myself to do because I was always just going constantly in order to prove something. And I realized I was just so much more effective and so much more fresh. And sometimes my biggest and best ideas and leaps forward came after I had taken some time for
Mm.
self-care, either a day or week. Or I think I mentioned to you, I always take December off. I usually have a couple clients here or there that I'm finishing up, but in general, I always take December off. And I started that during labor and delivery season in my life
Mm.
because I didn't want to risk being gone on Christmas Eve or Christmas morning with my children. To me, that was like,
Mm.
that was that no point. I wouldn't
Yeah.
take anybody on 3 weeks either side. And I just kind of a continuation of that. We have a friend, mutual friend recently that we talked about a business venture for me. And I just told her I wouldn't even entertain it till after the first year. And I don't know that that's socially acceptable, but for me, that's self-care
Yeah.
because I know I don't have to I gave myself permission to relax. And so when I start back up, I'm really ready to be in that space. So
I really like that idea of boundaries and really being clear on what is okay for you and what's not okay. I remember learning about the barefoot Contessa. Oh, what is her name? Do you remember? I'm totally blanking on her name right now, but she's this famous chef on TV.
yes, I actually have
And
a girlfriend whose daughter we named the Barefoot Contessa years ago. She's just started college this year. So yes, I know who you're talking about.
okay, so I learned about her where, somebody wanted her similarly, like a business venture, let's open a bunch of restaurants, that would be a great moneymaker for you or whatever. And she's like, nope, I don't want to do that. And it's very clear to her, like that didn't fit into her lifestyle and what she wanted for her business brand and for just her as a person. And I love that power that comes with knowing yourself well enough to say, no, I'm taking December off. We can talk about it after that. Or no, I'm not going to do that business venture that doesn't fit in with what I want. I think that's so powerful. And I think that exercising those boundaries, and it can just be so impactful in our lives and also in our businesses. It's a great thing to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't think most people even realize that they have a right to do that, or that sometimes actually that is just an enormous leap forward to be able to hit that point in your life. They feel like if they take that time off, that it's actually a step backward or it's a lack of professionalism. And honestly, for me, I think to be able to do that is a step forward in self awareness, self-worth. It's managing your business and your time properly. Like I talked about, one of your most valuable resources is your time. And next to that would be your health. Well, you can't work 24/7 and not just physically, but mentally, and not have it impact your health. You can't just be going constantly and not respecting time or allowing other people to expect your time. I realized some businesses, like when I was doing labor and delivery, people went into labor in the middle of dinner and I had to do that. But, being able to turn your phone off during dinner and spend an hour or two with your family or your kids while they do homework or go to a kids game, you don't have to be at everybody's beck and call to be professional. And that leads into the respect that is demanding that respect, because if you don't, you're going to be waiting on everyone else instead of pursuing your own dreams. And that's really important.
Yeah. And I think as women, we have this culture of, like you said, it's difficult to say no. And it feels like we don't have the right to say no. And I love that you use that term of knowing your rights,
Yeah.
either as, either for delivering a baby, you get to decide, it's your body, you get to decide what your birth is like. And that's a little more clear cut than, as a woman, as a mother, as a business owner, like really understanding you have the right to say no to things and you have the right to set time frames around things. And what would you recommend to somebody? I can hear some of my friends' voices in my head right now saying, like, I can't say no to things. Like, we're people pleasers by nature, I think,
We
and it's
are.
hard. And what would you recommend? Like, what's your advice for that?
Well, that's kind of my expertise in my coaching is defining this space. And, it's a long process. It takes women several weeks or several months to get to that. But part of it is defining not only what you will accept, but what you won't accept.
Mm.
And also being willing to accept other people's reactions to that. Usually if someone has a negative reaction to you saying no, or you pulling back, or you even changing, sometimes you can make exponential change and just feel so good about something. When you go running into your room and you're like, hey, look what I did. And everybody's like, and you're like, ugh. You have a right to do that. But what happens when you run into a room and everybody's kind of, or your spouses or your family or your coworkers, you need to realize that that's them. And most people, in my opinion, don't react to what you're doing necessarily, but how it's going to impact them.
Right.
And so, telling somebody that you can't, help them with a project or help them move on Saturday because you have a big job and they think that you're just blowing them off because, you work from home and, or you're self-employed. Certainly you could take a couple hours off and help them.
Right.
that's just a lack of respect for your time, because if you told them that your boss was requiring you to attend an event, they'd be like, oh, hey, okay. So you need to keep that in mind and realize that what they're actually upset about is that they needed your help and that you can't give it to them. They may not understand the rationale behind that, but they don't need to. That's not your job to do that. I always tell my coaching clients, if they have a really hard time with no, is to give no explanations. And I know that sounds really cold and really rude, but you really don't owe anybody an explanation. If you tell somebody, no, you can't do something, because an explanation is an open door for someone to try to overcome whatever it is you told them. And it doesn't matter how legit that is. I mean, you could totally make something up, but it could be really legit. Like, I'm having surgery at 10 a.m. I don't think I can make it to your dinner party. Well, you'll be out of surgery by then. It's like, no, I don't want to go to your dinner party. So giving people explanations when you say no is big. The other thing is doing it graciously. Say, hey, I just really appreciate you thinking of me. This is a wonderful opportunity, or I would love to be there, but I just can't. And leave it at that. And I used to kind of make fun of my mom, because she used to always say, she's like, well, I need to do this. I was like, well, let's go to lunch. And she's like, I can't today. I'm like, what do you got going on? She goes, things. And I was like, what? But I knew full well, looking back now, she was a very, very wise woman.
Beautiful teacher. I love that.
Because if she had just told me whatever it was she was doing, it was really none of my business. She could have been sitting naked in her living room, drinking coffee all day. That's what she wanted to do. I mean, she wasn't, but
right.
But it was none of my business, even as her daughter. And so sometimes that's your kids, your spouse, your coworkers, your friends. Sometimes you really, really do want to do what it is your friends have asked you to do. And you have to have some kind of self-discipline too. That's a time management. If you're running a business or starting a business, you have to be able to say no. You might want to go to the winery with your girlfriends on Friday afternoon, but you may realize that really you have some time sensitive stuff that you really need to work on. And, nobody's going to be there lording over you. And you might still get it done by Monday morning, but are you going to be up all Sunday night panicked? I mean, that's not really a good way to function. So sometimes people don't understand. You really want to do it, but you can't. You have to discipline yourself as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I love that. It's such I would imagine that if you can set those boundaries, it filters into everything, and it changes, how you come to things. I know, like, just a simple example, like if you just get enough rest or you have the space to do something, the way you feel doing it is a very different feeling than if you're tired and overworked and, have too much going on. You're
and that's a
overwhelmed.
way of being proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I had coming out in a previous book I did this year. One of the things we talked about was, and I do with my clients, is not looking at boundaries as brick walls or impenetrable, obstacles to overcome or to block out things, to look at them more. And I've got a program I do with the gated communities and fenced in communities. And that's another topic together. But if you look at your boundaries more as like a chain link fence or a picket fence or something with a gate, and you can look over that, you can see what's coming at you. You can plan, what's, you can decide whether to let them in or let them out. A fence boundary can easily be expanded or retracted depending on what you need. Do you need a closed, tight, more defined space right now that you can't, deal with? And there's a lot that comes with defining that. But so a boundary isn't necessarily an impenetrable wall. I think we overemphasize boundaries right now. And I think a lot of the 20-year-old and 30-year-old generations, boundaries was just a huge thing. It's like, oh, you got to know your boundaries. People have to respect your space. And like, well, they do, but you need to respect your own space too. People aren't mind readers. And so if you don't well define that space, they always talk about fences make really good neighbors. Well, that kind of creates on a personal basis too. If your fences are not properly built and in the right spaces or in the right plane where they need to be, you aren't going to have good neighbors and good friends or good relationships between your business and yourself and your friends and things. They need to be well defined. That doesn't mean that you can't move them or open a gate and invite somebody in, but it's your space. You need to know when you can ask that person or that whatever it is into leave as well.
Well, our lives are so seasonal too, when you have, a newborn, you might have different boundaries than if you have a teenager, for example, and as things evolve and shift, then your boundaries can also evolve and shift. And
That's really important because, like you said, having a newborn, for instance, for some people, that might be leaving a gate open and having all of their resources come in and help them and help manage and, bring in. For other people, it would be locking that gate and closing that space and really focusing on getting your own, vibe going.
right.
And it is interesting, for everybody that looks differently, but it is important to define that for sure. I know my daughter in particular, for her, when she has a little one, she usually really wants to take a week or two that's just her and her family. And especially with me having worked in labor and delivery, a lot of people, she just moved kind of back to the area, just don't understand why I just didn't have a right, or that I wasn't going to be present at her birth or there for the couple weeks afterwards. And we have a fabulous relationship. But part of that was me respecting her space and hearing her wishes. It wasn't about me personally. It wasn't my experience. It wasn't my baby. Maybe I've been through enough births. I just kind of, but I think too often people take that thing personally. I've had a lot of friends who felt if they didn't allow their mother or their mother-in-law or their friends to be present at that space, or, whatever time or event that is in their life, that they were offending people or excluding people. And especially with very personal things, that's not their space. That's your space. And so you need to choose how they're serving you best. And sometimes people don't understand that no matter how much you love them, that space is actually the gift that they're giving you. You don't need them there. Just allowing you that time to grow and evolve and figure out what you need is the most important gift they can give. And for women, being able to receive that gift or any gift is really tough. We aren't generally receivers either. So
I love that. I love that so much. And it's such a broad conversation, but also such a tangible and actionable conversation to be able to start thinking about how we can apply these different ideas into our businesses and also our families and personal lives. But so you've been in business for yourself for, you said, 30 years.
mhm.
So thinking back to when you first started, like, is there something that you can share that maybe surprised you or was different than what you thought about kind of running your own business?
I hate paperwork, so keeping track of that stuff. Thank God my husband is really good at that. So, there are things you might want to delegate that you
Yeah.
just know you don't want to do. I hate doing taxes and record keeping and all that stuff. So, if that's not your forte and baking bread or making cakes is, make sure you set yourself up for that because you're going to hate it. Trust me. If I had to do all the paperwork, I probably would have bailed a long time ago. I think sometimes we underestimate how much time it takes to get a business off the ground, not just footwork, but just the length of time to really begin to see that turnaround where you feel like things are running like an oiled machine. I think that really surprised me. And I've kind of, through the years, opened and closed or morphed a couple of businesses, and each one has taken its own time to be birthed. I mean, there's a process of growth and development before it really takes off. So
Absolutely.
I think those would be the two things. Yeah.
I love those. Thank you. And they really tie into the other things you've mentioned, setting the boundaries of like what you're willing to do and what you're not willing to do in your business. And also, knowing yourself and knowing that process and giving yourself the space for that business to.
Yeah. I think a lot of people start a business and they expect, and some people do, you expect to make an enormous amount of money and be wildly successful overnight. And that does happen. But, and actually, even in that context, some people aren't always prepared for that either. That immediate change can be a real drain, and a management nightmare because everything hits you all at once and you didn't see it coming. But yeah, I
A
think
little
give yourself time to develop that business and trust yourself. If you don't see the rewards like overnight, don't
Yeah.
think you're doing something wrong. Don't still say, well, I can't take any time off because I haven't really moved. You are moving forward. And sometimes even taking that little bit of time off or taking a weekend to step away from it actually can propel you forward much quicker.
I love that. You have so much wisdom. I really appreciate everything you've shared and all the ideas that you've
Thank
shared
you,
with me.
Pepper. So I really appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. It's been so much fun talking to you. Let everybody know where the best place to find you is.
Actually, my favorite I do have an Instagram account. It's just my name, all Micheline Edwards in lowercase. But really, Facebook is still really my main platform. I have both a coaching page and a farm page, which kind of the farm is more local, but I do post a lot of recipes and just lifestyle tips on that, especially this year because we haven't hosted a lot of hands-on people just because of the lockdown. But Messenger is probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay.
But my email is pretty readily available on any of those platforms, so you can message me. But I check that pretty regularly because I am busy, and so Messenger is kind of a quick check. I don't have to sit down with my computer and do a whole bunch of like email checks. So
Awesome. Well, I will list all of those things in the show notes for this episode. And I
thank
really
you.
appreciate your time, and it's been so much fun talking to you.
Well, thank you, Pepper. I've just really enjoyed being here.
Thank you, Micheline, for talking with us today. You can find out more information about Micheline and the link to her website in the show notes for this episode at smallbusinesssisterhood.com/26. I hope you found this episode useful and inspiring. If you did, please pop over to iTunes and leave a review. Thanks for listening. Catch you next time.